On February 4, 2025, Robert Lighthizer, the former U.S. Trade Representative, delivered a stark warning about the growing military capabilities of China, emphasizing that the nation poses an existential threat to the United States. Lighthizer's assertion is particularly alarming as he highlighted that China possesses a war material production capacity that is 4 times greater than that of the U.S. This significant disparity raises serious concerns about national security and the balance of power between the two countries. Lighthizer's comments come in the context of an ongoing debate within U.S. policy circles regarding how to effectively address the challenges posed by China's military expansion and technological advancements. He urged the U.S. government to consider increasing tariffs on Chinese goods as a strategic response to counteract China's growing influence and military capabilities. This recommendation reflects a broader sentiment among some policymakers who believe that economic measures such as tariffs are necessary to protect American interests and maintain a competitive edge. The backdrop to Lighthizer's warning is the tumultuous history of U.S. China trade relations, particularly during the Trump administration. The trade war that escalated under President Trump saw both nations imposing tariffs on each other's goods as a means of negotiating trade deals and addressing perceived trade imbalances. Trump's confrontational approach towards China was a significant theme during his 2016 election campaign, framing China as a strategic competitor that needed to be held accountable for unfair trade practices. While Lighthizer focused on the military implications of China's production capacity, there are broader economic considerations at play. Critics of a tariff-heavy strategy argue that such measures could lead to negative consequences for American businesses and consumers. Tariffs can increase the cost of goods, leading to inflation and potentially harming the very industries they are meant to protect. Additionally, there is concern that escalating trade tensions could lead to a military confrontation, a scenario that many commentators view as highly undesirable. The complexities of U.S.-China relations are further complicated by differing assessments of China's global ambitions. Some analysts argue that the U.S. needs to adopt a more nuanced approach that balances economic considerations with national security imperatives. This perspective emphasizes the importance of engaging with China diplomatically while also being prepared to respond to any aggressive moves by the Chinese government. In summary, Robert Lighthizer's warnings about China's military production capabilities and the potential for increased tariffs underscore a critical juncture in U.S. foreign policy. The interplay between national security and economic strategies continues to be a focal point of debate as the U.S. navigates its relationship with China. Moving forward, policymakers will need to carefully consider the implications of their choices, weighing the need for robust defense capabilities against the potential economic fallout of aggressive trade measures. Former U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer's assertion that China poses an existential threat to the United States due to its significant war material production capacity, 4 times that of the U.S., presents several counterintuitive insights regarding the implications of tariffs and U.S.-China relations. 1. Economic protectionism versus national security. Lighthizer advocates for increased tariffs as a defense mechanism against China's military capabilities. However, this position is counterintuitive because protectionist measures can lead to unintended economic consequences. While intended to bolster national security, tariffs can increase costs for American consumers and businesses, potentially undermining the economic stability that is essential for national defense. 2. Military confrontation risks. Lighthizer's focus on the military threat posed by China might suggest a straightforward connection between economic policies and defense readiness. Yet the escalation of tariffs could inadvertently lead to heightened tensions that increase the likelihood of military confrontation. This paradox highlights the complex interplay between economic strategies and geopolitical stability. 3. Tariffs as a double-edged sword. While tariffs are seen as a tool to rectify trade imbalances and curb China's influence, they are also criticized for potentially harming American industries that rely on Chinese imports. This complexity challenges the simplistic notion that tariffs will automatically strengthen U.S. economic and military standing. Instead, they may create vulnerabilities in the domestic economy that could weaken the U.S. position globally. For domestic political dynamics, the discourse around tariffs often emphasizes a unified front against China. However, there is a counterintuitive division among American businesses and political factions regarding the efficacy of tariffs. Some sectors might benefit from protectionist measures while others, particularly those dependent on affordable raw materials from China, may strongly oppose them. This internal conflict complicates the narrative that tariffs will uniformly enhance national security. 5. Long-term versus short-term strategies. Lighthizer's warning suggests an immediate response to China's military capabilities through tariffs. However, this approach neglects the potential for long-term strategies that could involve diplomatic engagement and multilateral cooperation. The counterintuitive aspect here is that a more collaborative approach could yield more sustainable security outcomes than a purely confrontational stance. 6. Consumer impact. The call for higher tariffs to counteract China's military threat may lead to increased prices for American consumers. This is counterintuitive to the goal of enhancing national security. A financially strained populace may be less supportive of defense initiatives and more susceptible to economic coercion from adversaries. In summary, Lighthizer's warnings about China's military production capabilities and the potential role of tariffs highlight a nuanced and often counterintuitive landscape in U.S. China relations. The interplay between economic policies, national security, and domestic political dynamics reveals complexities that challenge straightforward interpretations of trade and military strategy. Robert Lighthizer's warning about China's military production capacity is a pivotal piece of information that deserves greater attention than it may receive in broader discussions about U.S.-China relations and economic policy. His assertion that China has a war material production capacity 4 times that of the U.S. not only raises alarms about national security but also underscores the strategic imbalance that could have profound implications for global stability and U.S. foreign policy. Significance of military production capacity. The significance of China's military production capacity lies in its potential to reshape the geopolitical landscape. In an era where military capabilities are increasingly intertwined with economic power, a country that can produce war materials at a scale vastly greater than its rivals can leverage this advantage in various ways. The ability to outproduce an adversary in military hardware means that in a conflict scenario China could sustain longer-lasting military operations, outpace the U.S. in terms of equipment availability, and potentially deter U.S. intervention in regional disputes. This military-industrial capability also reflects on China's broader strategic ambitions. It can signal to neighboring countries and global powers that China is prepared for sustained military engagement, which could lead to shifts in alliances and provoke reactions from other nations, particularly those within the U.S. sphere of influence in Asia. The implications of this can extend to economic relations, trade agreements, and defense partnerships, thereby impacting U.S. interests and influence in the region. Underappreciated economic impacts of tariffs. While Lighthizer's call for increased tariffs on Chinese goods may resonate with certain sectors advocating for protectionist measures, the economic implications of such tariffs are complex and often overlooked. Tariffs are generally designed to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. However, they can also lead to increased prices for consumers and strain U.S. businesses that rely on Chinese imports for their operations. The economic backlash from tariffs is often felt most acutely by small and medium-sized enterprises (SMEs) that may not have the resources to absorb cost increases or find alternative suppliers. As these businesses struggle, the effects can cascade through the economy, leading to job losses and reduced consumer spending. This aspect of tariff implementation needs to be weighed against the intended benefits of enhancing national security, as economic stability is also a critical component of national strength. Interconnection of economic and military strategies. The interconnection between economic policies such as tariffs and military strategies should not be underestimated. Lighthizer's framing of the issue highlights a broader perspective that recognizes the military implications of economic decisions. The idea that tariffs can serve as a tool to mitigate an existential threat from China aligns with a growing school of thought that advocates for a holistic approach to national security. However, this also raises critical questions about the efficacy of tariffs as a deterrent. The assumption that economic pressure will lead to strategic concessions from China may not hold true, particularly if China perceives itself as being in a position of strength. Thus, there is a risk that escalating tariffs could exacerbate tensions rather than resolve them, leading not only to economic fallout but also to a potential military confrontation, a concern echoed by various analysts. Long-term strategic considerations. In considering Lighthizer's warnings and the call for tariffs, it's crucial to evaluate the long-term strategic considerations. The U.S. must balance immediate national security concerns with the potential for fostering a more cooperative relationship with China. The possibility of a military confrontation looms large, and as such, U.S. policymakers should explore avenues for engagement that might mitigate risks while still addressing security concerns. Policy frameworks that prioritize dialogue and diplomacy while also ensuring that the U.S. maintains a robust defense posture may be more effective in addressing the multifaceted challenges posed by China. Tariffs and economic sanctions may serve as short-term measures but could lead to long-term adversarial relationships that are counterproductive to U.S. interests. Conclusion. Robert Lighthizer's assertions about China's military production capabilities and the context of tariffs provide an important lens through which to examine U.S. China relations. The potential military implications of economic policies, the nuanced impacts of tariffs on American businesses and consumers, and the long-term strategic landscape are all critical elements that warrant deeper analysis. As the U.S. navigates this complex relationship, a balanced approach that prioritizes both security and economic stability will be essential to avoid unintended consequences and to foster a peaceful international order. 1. China's military production capacity. Robert Lighthiser's assertion that China possesses a war material production capacity 4 times that of the U.S. is a critical point for in-depth analysis. This disparity highlights a significant shift in global military power dynamics and raises concerns regarding U.S. national security. A deeper analysis could explore the implications of this military capability on U.S. defense strategies, international alliances, and the potential for geopolitical conflicts. 2. Tariffs as a strategic tool. Lighthizer's call for increased tariffs on Chinese goods presents a multifaceted issue. While tariffs are often seen as a mechanism to protect domestic industries and address trade imbalances, they also carry risks of economic backlash against American businesses and consumers. An in-depth discussion could evaluate the effectiveness of tariffs as a foreign policy tool, considering historical precedents, economic theories, and real-world impacts on both the U.S. and Chinese economies. 3. Impact on U.S.-China relations. The ongoing dialogue about tariffs and military threats is set against a backdrop of complex U.S.-China relations. The historical context of the trade war, including the escalation of tensions under the Trump administration, serves as a foundation for understanding current dynamics. An analytical approach could examine how these economic measures influence diplomatic relations, global trade patterns, and the potential for conflict, discussing whether a confrontational stance is sustainable or if a more collaborative approach is necessary. 4. Balancing economic and national security concerns. The interplay between national security and economic strategies, particularly in the context of U.S.-China relations, is a major theme in Lighthizer's warnings. This point invites an in-depth exploration of the challenges faced by U.S. policymakers in balancing these two critical areas. A thorough analysis could include discussions on the role of economic interdependence, the implications of military preparedness, and the potential for policy solutions that address both security and economic growth without escalating tensions further. 1. The U.S.-Japan trade disputes of the 1980s. During the late 20th century, particularly the 1980s, the United States faced significant trade imbalances with Japan, which was seen as a rising economic competitor. The U.S. government under President Ronald Reagan imposed tariffs on Japanese electronics and automobiles, citing unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft. These tensions led to a series of negotiations that resulted in the Plaza Accord of 1985, where the U.S., Japan, and European countries agreed to depreciate the U.S. dollar against the yen and other currencies. The situation reflected concerns about national security and economic dominance similar to current apprehensions regarding China's military and economic capabilities. 2. The Cold War arms race. The Cold War era saw the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in an intense arms race driven by mutual perceptions of existential threats. The U.S. sought to counteract the Soviet Union's military capabilities by significantly increasing its defense spending and developing advanced military technology. This period was characterized by both economic and military strategies to contain the perceived threat. The aggressive posturing, including military buildups and the establishment of tariffs on certain goods, paralleled today's concerns about China's military production capacity and the U.S. response through economic measures like tariffs. 3. The trade wars of the 1930s. Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. In response to the Great Depression, the United States enacted the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in 1930, which raised tariffs on hundreds of imports. The goal was to protect American industries from foreign competition, but it resulted in retaliatory tariffs from other countries and a significant decline in international trade. This isolationist policy is often cited as exacerbating the economic downturn. The parallels to current U.S. China relations are noteworthy, as tariffs are once again being employed in an effort to protect national interests amidst concerns over competition and security. The Smoot-Hawley Act illustrates the potential pitfalls of using tariffs as a tool for economic and national security concerns. Echoing Lighthizer's warnings about the implications of tariffs on U.S. businesses and consumers today, former U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer's warnings regarding China's military production capabilities and the call for increased tariffs point to a broader and increasingly complex landscape in U.S.-China relations. As we look toward the future, several predictions can be made about the trajectory of these relations, the implications for global trade, and the potential impact on national security. 1. Escalation of tariffs and trade tensions. Given the current environment, it is likely that the United States will continue to impose and increase tariffs on Chinese goods as a means of countering perceived threats. This trend may escalate, particularly if the U.S. administration perceives an urgent need to address national security concerns related to China's military capabilities. The expectation is that tariffs will not only target traditional manufacturing sectors but will also extend to high-tech industries, including semiconductors and artificial intelligence technologies, which are critical for military and economic competitiveness. 2. Shift toward decoupling. The economic decoupling between the U.S. and China is anticipated to accelerate. American companies may increasingly seek to relocate supply chains away from China to mitigate risks associated with tariffs and geopolitical tensions. This could lead to a significant restructuring of global supply chains, with Southeast Asian countries, India, and even domestic manufacturing in the U.S. becoming more attractive alternatives. The outcome could be a fragmented global economy, where trade alliances are realigned based on national security and technological autonomy rather than purely economic considerations. 3. Heightened national security concerns. Lighthizer's characterization of China as an existential threat signifies a growing consensus on the need for robust national security measures. Future U.S. administrations may prioritize defense spending and technological advancements in response to China's military capabilities. This could lead to increased collaboration with allies, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, to counterbalance China's influence and assertiveness in areas such as the South China Sea. 4. Potential for military confrontation. While the hope is for diplomatic resolutions, the likelihood of military confrontation cannot be dismissed. The more the U.S. emphasizes military readiness and deterrence in the context of its trade and economic policies, the higher the chances of miscalculations or incidents leading to armed conflict. Moreover, as China continues to expand its military capabilities, the U.S. may feel compelled to respond more aggressively, which could escalate tensions further. 5. Domestic economic implications. The imposition of tariffs will have mixed repercussions for the U.S. economy. While some sectors may benefit from protectionist measures, others, particularly those relying on Chinese imports, could face increased costs leading to higher prices for consumers. This could result in inflationary pressures and diminished consumer spending power, potentially dampening economic growth. Policymakers will need to find a balance between protecting national security and ensuring economic stability. 6. Global reactions and alliances. China's growing military capabilities and the U.S.'s response will likely prompt reactions from other nations. Countries in Asia, Europe, and beyond will have to navigate this complex landscape, carefully balancing their economic ties with China against their strategic alliances with the United States. This could lead to a reconfiguration of international alliances, where countries seek to position themselves favorably in the emerging geopolitical order. 7. Technological arms race. The competition between the U.S. and China is expected to intensify in the realm of technology. Both nations are investing heavily in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and cybersecurity, viewing technological superiority as critical to national security. This arms race could lead to significant advancements in technology but also increase the risks of cyber warfare, espionage, and intellectual property theft. 8. Impact on global trade agreements. The ongoing tensions may undermine existing global trade agreements and institutions. Countries may begin to prioritize bilateral agreements that align more closely with their national security interests over multilateral trade frameworks. This could lead to a more fragmented trading environment, complicating global commerce and potentially stifling economic growth. Conclusion. The warnings from Robert Lighthizer encapsulate a pivotal moment in U.S. China relations. One that is marked by a confluence of economic, military, and ideological challenges. The future outlook suggests a landscape characterized by increased tariffs, economic decoupling, heightened national security focus, and potential military confrontations. As both nations navigate this complex web of interactions, the implications will extend far beyond their borders, influencing global economic and geopolitical dynamics for years to come. Balancing security and economic interests will remain a critical challenge for policymakers in both countries as they chart a path forward in this new era of competition and confrontation.